Thank you everybody for joining us. We'll start exactly at 3 p.m. Down. Hello everyone, it's 3 p.m. now. We should start. Welcome everybody to our webinar on mastering next-gen SIEM use cases. This is a webinar series. Today we are doing the first part. Today our speaker is Shomiran Dasgupta. He's the founder of Net Monastery that has an active threat hunting platform called DNIF. Net Monastery has been engaged in research and development of big data analytic engines for cybersecurity. If you have any questions for the speaker, kindly drop in your questions in the question box in your control panel on the right-hand side. The speaker will address them at the end of the session. Thank you, Shomiran, for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. This is a little weird to do webinars because it's hard on the, we're all always wondering whether we're still connected and people can hear you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Shomiran. Just to give you a quick heads up, we basically sat down and there's something that we had this discussion, me and Bikash, we were having this discussion where we were talking about what kind of use cases people were using today. And the thought was that we should, come up with a base where we could discuss what could be the next set of use cases that people could, work on. And that was the basis of, bringing this program together. And what we figured that there's just such a lot of content that, we had to talk about that we could not basically cramp it in one session or a couple of sessions. So we're doing this over 3 parts. There are going to be 3 back-to-back webinars like this, and where we are going to essentially discuss right from the beginning, the base of what has changed and what kind of, where this industry is going and why we need to adapt, and then we figure out what we need to do exactly And this is going to be more of a hands-on workshop kind of a thing where we will actually talk about certain challenges, and we'll try and figure out ways to essentially uh, you know, solve those challenges with advanced cases that we speak about. All right, so I am good to go. Hope everybody is here. And Preeta, just a note because you know, it's eerie to be on a webinar. In case you stop, you know, if you don't hear me or something happens in the middle, please give me a call on my cell phone so that you can alert me. There is nothing else I can see on screen. So yeah.
Sure, sure, sure.
Thank you.
I'll do that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get going. So who is this speaking? Yeah. So let me just give you a quick brief on what we do and who I am. Oh, this is, by the way, the cat series. So I mean, we are going to be, you know, you probably see a cat on every screen. We'll talk about this joke later. All right. So Shamiron is my handle. So if you want to look me up on Twitter, that's someplace you can go. I founded Net Monastery about 15 years back, and we built about three different sets of technologies. One initial set was more on research around intrusion prevention systems. This was about 2002, 2005. And then we did a lot of work on traffic anomaly systems, building. The second product was more about what we call the managed detection and response space today. That was about 2007. And finally, we got NIF, which is DNIF. Yeah, that happened. We started building this platform in about 2015-16 timeframes. Right. So it came out GA. It became generally available in 2017. That was last year. Right. So this is essentially panned out to be a integrated threat hunting platform for cyber SOCs that you have in the banking system. But similar facilities in the telecom and IT space as well. My core specialization has been in intrusion detection. That is essentially what I've been doing for a living. That has manifested into research in that space, in the hunting space, something that you'll see a lot of today. Then there is a lot of work that is currently happening, at least for the last 8 to 10 months, over the machine learning space and what we could do with machine learning and to solve challenges in the cybersecurity space with ML. Yeah, and one of the unique things, right? I mean, we of course, the cybersecurity space is a very small one, and we've got friends everywhere. We have very few people in the detection side or the defense side. Most of us are, you know, have had a career in offensive, but me personally, I have had a career in the defense side where I am focused on detecting attacks, identifying attackers, and doing this really fast in real time, etc. So that's been largely my focus. My primary qualification in the space is I'm a GCIA. I did that in the year 2000, which is about 18 years back. And since then, we've been 18 years of intrusion detection and handling. We've worked on several cases on the handling side as well. So that you'll see in the experience that comes out. NIF is again 50 plus A-listed customers in India itself, and we're Net Monastery is 15 years plus in the years of business. Okay, so that's enough introduction. Let's see what we can expect from this three-part series. At this point, we're still calling it three-part. We're hoping to finish it in 3 parts. The last part is the content for the last part is still being worked upon as we speak, but hopefully we'll be able to cram that into the 3 parts. So this is the full series that we'll talk about. So they'll give you a good idea of where we are going. How do we change the way we think about detection today, and why does it need to change first? I mean, that's a primary question that we want to ask ourselves. The second thing is more about objectives, what kind of strategies we can use, and I mean, what are we trying to do today? Are we're spending a lot of money on security, agreed, but what are we trying to do? What are our end objectives? Can we, like a business goes about building a business plan, can we come up with a plan which gives us clear objectives of what we're trying to do? That will make life substantially easier. Then we'll end up spending lesser money. That's my thinking. I might be wrong, but yeah, I mean it's a free thought for everybody to consume. Strategies and tools that you need. We'll of course have a very detailed. The next two sessions are going to be detailed workshops. The first one is going to be like a planning workshop. So this one is more about the thought process. Then we'll also talk about we'll of course, when you're building use cases, you have to be very cognizant about these the scope that you're going to deploy your use cases for. So one of the strategies that we'll talk about today is about defining scopes, right? So here we'll also go into, in the last session, we'll go into taking Swift. I mean, Swift is taking a lot of banter right now in terms of not just cybersecurity, but the FRM space also, the fraud and risk management space as well. And how you could employ these kind of use cases, these advanced cases that we talk about on the Swift side, right? And demonstrate to ourselves how you deploy particular use cases on a given segment, right? And finally, how do you set up a threat hunting workshop for yourself so that you could do this on a continual basis and have clear improvement and progress monitoring going forward, right? So these are the 4 or 5 things broadly that we'll cover. Today's is easy. We'll do objectives, we'll do strategy, we'll do processes, we'll do toolkits, and finally we'll leave a good chunk of time for discussions, because I think I'll be clear and frank with you. This space is an evolving space. Cybersecurity itself is evolving. I mean, I keep saying this. Cybersecurity changes every week, right? So because something new happens, and there is a whole new dimension that we need to manage. So today we are all very new in this space, and so a lot of conversations essentially govern the move forward. So there is a constant course correction that's happening between us to make sure that we're relevant in the future. Okay, let's get going. So what are the objectives of the next gen SIEM, right? Rather than what is threat hunting, right? I mean, these are convoluted questions, but I wish I could ask this to an audience and have somebody speaking back. But when I do, I typically see answers like the next gen SIEM should be able to predict attacks, right? This is something that this is very commonly heard these days. Prediction of attacks, right? The moment you say prediction, that we are talking about prediction of human intent. That when a human being intends to attack, you should be able to find that out. That's still sci-fi at this point. But what could be a good objective would be how can you identify symptoms of a larger attack that is coming to us, right? Or how can you identify symptoms of an initial phase of attack or recon of attack that could, basically turn up as a much larger or a much graver, impactful attack that happens on us. So that could be one of the answers to covering intent. But we'll sort of narrow it down over here and tone it down to very simple things today. A lot of people talk about threat hunting because most of the next generation use cases are going to be use cases that have been used to identify attacks not just in an automated manner, but also where a human being is traversing through data and trying to identify bad symptoms of attack, right? So it's going to be um, it's going to be both of these put together. So we'll talk. So that therefore we'll try and objectivize what threat hunting is today. First is threat hunting is proactive, right? Today we have lots of systems that uh, detect symptoms of attack or detect attacks, and then they send us emails or notify us or tell, pop up as a alert on the SOC screen. But threat hunting is different. Threat hunting is where a user is actually diving into data to try and figure out an attack. So it's a proactive action. It's not a reactive action where the system's picked it up and it's telling you it's reactive. But when you are proactively looking for an attacker in or an indicator of compromise or an event of interest, right? That's where we are talking about. That's where we are talking about proactively looking for attacks. Now, there is the EOI essentially means event of interest. IOC means indicator of compromise. The difference between the two is EOI is where um, you find a particular action which is interesting. I mean, the reason I'm explaining this is because we are going to use this going forward. The terminology is important. So EOI is an event of interest, which is a action or an event which is interesting, but you can't call it incriminating yet. So something that is suspicious that needs to be investigated forward, that's called a EOI. And IOC is essentially known that this, when you have IOC, it can be a IP address, or it could be a file name or a file hash or a piece of code, right? Which is known to be bad. So there is, this cybersecurity community essentially collaborates on IOCs, where I know, hey, this is a bad file name, or this is a bad file hash, or this is a bad domain name, or this is a bad URL, right? So that intelligence is shared. So that's what we call IOCs. So when you're having a threat hunter is essentially working largely with EOIs and then collaborating with IOC providers to validate these things. Next, obviously, is the third-party validation or the collaboration that you bring in, where you've identified certain EOIs, and then you got to move to the next level where you're trying to find out whether these EOIs are actually bad or not, right? So there could be two scenarios over here. One is you have an event of interest which is proven to be bad because you validated that with a collaborative source. A collaborative source could be anybody like a VirusTotal or a malware domains or domain tools, right? These are people, or Symantec or IBM Xsource, for instance. These are people who provide intelligence. There are lots of these intelligence providers today. So you could have a subscription with any one of them or many of them, where your SOC engineer or the threat hunter can actually validate a particular event of interest with a third-party data provider. So this is one situation where you have a EOI and you have validated that with a third-party vendor, and it turns out to be bad. So that's where you know that there is a particular attack that has manifested. But there could be another scenario where the event of interest did not match correctly with a third-party provider. That does not clearly mean that it is bad, but it which essentially means today is that you need to further investigate that to figure out whether it's bad or not. IOCs are just shortcuts to identify attacks because it's a known database. But when you don't match the IOCs, when it's the longer route where you have to go validate and figure out for yourself whether that's a sign of attack or not. Okay, and the last thing that you need is security engineering. Now, this is a skill that is coming up in a way, right? Today, a lot of people realize that in organizations you have a need for cybersecurity engineering. So, cybersecurity engineering is different from SOC analysts, right? Is different from uh, people who are doing cybersecurity consulting. Security engineering is that part that essentially automates and ties your different systems together so that they work in a collaborative manner, and they work faster, and it's not broken in the process, right? So there is this, you'll see that in the next few years this skill of cybersecurity engineers will become very important for us, so that they are able to tie up the multitude of security devices that we have, and they are able to basically bring brain logic and implement that on those systems. Now, over here in the threat hunting space, you will need those guys to build these playbooks and execute these playbooks when these events occur. Now, what are playbooks? Playbooks are collection of um, let me call them actions, right? So if today in everybody who's experienced a security operations center today, uh, let me talk to those people first. So if you get an alert that comes on screen, uh, that particular analyst has to uh, take certain steps to investigate that alert, right? And then the person essentially realizes whether this was a false positive, this was my boss going to the wrong site, or this was actually a drive-by download that happened on a browser, right? So it could be one of the three. So on each alert, you will find that there are certain steps that need to be taken to analyze that particular alert, right? And when you analyze that particular alert, you are able to then come into one of these three buckets, land in one of these three buckets. Now, uh, every alert uh, has its own investigative path, right? So today, what's happened is that there are since this security engineering is possible, you can automate that particular action for a particular alert to a substantial extent, right? So, for instance, today what happens is when the SOC engineer sees an alert, he takes that URL. Let's say it's a URL that comes up, right? He then takes that URL, goes to VirusTotal, checks if it's a known URL or not. Then he goes to domain tools to figure out if the domain was right or not, right? Or if it's a malicious domain or not. How long back was this domain registered? Is it pointing to a bulletproof hosting provider or not, right? So these kind of questions, this analyst has to open up multiple browser tabs and go through the paces on this. Whereas today, since since APIs are possible, all this could be tied in, and when and we could come to a point where once an alert is driven or delivered to the screen, all these pre-checks have already been done, right? Today we can go to an extent where, let's say for instance, you get an alert for somebody created a user on the firewall, right? You're a big enterprise, and obviously there are lots of people, lots of users. Let's say Santosh as a user got added to your firewall admin list, right? You want to find out whether this was legit or not. So today, what happens is the SOC engineer makes a call to the somebody in the admin department to figure out if a new user has joined, and is he a firewall administrator, etc., and then be able to close that ticket. You today systems can be so automated that it can log into a change management system in using this playbook, and then figure out if a new admin has been approved, and if that admin's name is what it says it is, right? Then the ticket closes automatically or the ticket doesn't turn up, or if this doesn't happen, if the match doesn't happen, then the ticket will turn up, and you know that the system has already done its check, so it's already a serious condition situation, right? So you can use automation and playbooks to make life easier and make things go faster with cybersecurity. Okay. Next, we are going to take up strategy, and I'm going to take part of this is logic that we've been working on. So a little bit of research on our side is going to come up here. We're going to talk about specifics of certain kinds of strategies that we can use. I'm going to bring a new perspective to the table, which I'll invite feedback from. Um, strategy is okay. I wish this was interactive, right? So anybody recognize this man? Uh, I'll break the suspense. This person is called. His name is Donald Rumsfeld. He was the U.S. Secretary of Defense when in the George Bush government. Okay. Now, here Donald Rumsfeld is, we're going to take something, we're going to take a particular piece of logic that he came up with, which I think is very, very relevant with cybersecurity today and cybersecurity defense today, right? So we're talking about the known known, the known unknown, and the unknown unknown condition. So I'll explain that. So for everybody who's heard this before, see if it matches up with cybersecurity today, right? So we're going to take the first condition, which is the known known condition. Yeah, I know you're feeling a little confused right now, but yeah, we'll open the grabs quickly. So the known known condition is for threats you know, right, and you know how to detect those threats, right? So for instance, you know what a brute force user account looks like, or somebody brute forcing a user account is an attack, and you know how to detect this attack. Today we know how to detect this attack. So I can write a rule which says, oh, the same user having more than 5 retries on a particular account, I'm sure this guy is a brute forcer, right? Or you can have the same IP address brute forcing multiple accounts, right? So it could be a horizontal or a vertical kind of brute force, right? So uh, you know what the attack looks like, and you know exactly how to detect them, right? Because today you can write a rule for that particular detection. So condition one is today we are capable of doing that because we have a SIEM that can help us write rules. I can write a rule of saying, I want to identify somebody who's scanning my website. So I can, write a rule on my web scanner where I ingest web server logs, and then I am able to identify same user having more than so many number of access, 404s or 200s within a certain amount of time. So this is more like a velocity scan, and be able to identify that particular scenario. So it's great to know that there is an attack. The attack looks like something, and I am able to identify that particular scenario by writing a rule, something like what antiviruses can do today, right? And have been doing for a while now. The second situation is the known unknown situation, where you know what the attack looks like, right? But there are just so many permutations to that attack that you are not able to write one single rule to detect it. So either if you go about writing rules, you would have to write hundreds of rules, or even after writing hundreds of rules, you don't know how many permutations are left out of consideration, right? So this is the known unknown condition. So you know what the attack looks like, but you don't know. But writing a single rule isn't possible in that particular given scenario. So give you an example of this, where in cybersecurity, user behavior, right, or UBA or UEBA kind of scenarios, where you have a user as an entity. Whenever a user misbehaves or does something that the person is not supposed to do, you essentially, you can write a rule to find out, this is normal, tell me what is abnormal, right? So those kind of things you can do. So here you essentially have to identify normal actions, and you can then write a exception rule to identify what, if there is an action which is not on the normal list, then you get notified, right? So that's more like the known unknown condition. And the third is the unknown unknown condition, where you don't know what attack is going to come at you next, right? So for instance, all the attack that happened on the microprocessors, right? We didn't see it coming, right? And we were not prepared for it. And that kind of attack hits you as well as, and since you don't know what the attack looks like, it's out of question to be able to come up with a strategy to detect it, right? So if you don't know what's going to hit you, you can't figure out a way to detect it clearly. So the larger problem is not knowing what attack is happening on you as of now, right? So today we are now, if you look at all the three scenarios, you will find that the first scenario we are very well covered. Yeah, we can, attacks we know of, and there are most of these attacks we can write rules for. So those that problem is pretty much solved, right? The second problem is where we are in the known unknown condition, where we are essentially seeking results right now, right? There are certain technologies which are already available which can do the known unknown condition. We are a lot of work still needs to be done to sort of say that this is also done, and let's go to the third phase now. So most of the work we'll do in the workshop is going to be in the known unknown condition, where we don't really know all the permutations which are bad, and we will have some kind of capability to assimilate a large amount of data and be able to figure out right versus wrong, right? And or being able to figure out manually, or validate manually at least, actions that could be wrong, right? So both these techniques we will validate, and we will use. The last, the unknown unknown condition, is where we're trying to use some kind of machine learning, or people say artificial intelligence. I don't know what that means completely, but no, although it's not that we don't know what that means, but there is there is a lot of AI and neurals that are being used currently, and we use a lot of that as well. But the context in which people are using that in cybersecurity, I don't quite agree with most of them. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's something that we could catch up over debate, and debate it sometime. But okay, hello. Okay, so next, let's go to the process engineering side of it, and figure out what are the paths to success over here. Um, Here, when we talk about the process, we're talking about now taking all this logic that we just spoke about, it which is very high level, and trying to fit that over uh, you know over our system, and sort of taking a case where we are actually trying to implement this high level logic onto uh, our environment, right? How, and this slide is going to be giving you more or less a roadmap on how that can be done. Okay, so first thing that I'd recommend, this is a recommendation. You could choose not to take the recommendation, but largely this is how it's understood. Most important is to, for us, or whenever we go into deployment, one thing that we do is mark out a boundary, right? I mean, this might look very obvious or sound very obvious, But when we go into, so let's say for instance, when we did our SIEM deployment or deployed a UEBA system, we looked at, oh, let's do phase wise, let's deploy the system. But by the time we went into deployment, we spent such a lot of time planning that we got our minds jumbled, and then we are essentially, you end up rolling it out for the entire organization. Let's say you're a 5,000 man organization or 2 lakh people organization, bank, right? And you're now deploying this daunting system. uh, I would always recommend to constantly review this entire process so that you're working on a smaller subset of people, because that's how you're going to be able to learn and identify what is right and what is wrong, because a particular set of people will signify a particular behavioral pattern, and that pattern will constantly change when the subset of people or the style of work they are doing changes, right? So the reason we spoke about Swift is, when we take the Swift environment, we see these 800 people doing similar kinds of activity on a day-to-day basis, and their behavior patterns are similar. So I would always recommend that you mark out a particular circus of people where they they are doing similar work, or have similar job roles, or have similar systems, or work on similar environments, or maybe part of a similar facility, right? Where we can have some kind of thread of similarity between the users, and we can base our modeling on those similarities, right? The moment you have, uh, you could then go phase wise and get, once you're done with a particular set of people or a particular scope, then you could identify another set of another scope that could be similar in nature and have certain similarities, so that way you could cover ground and be able to deploy faster. One of our experiences is that, in when you're doing advanced cases, um, the first environment takes the maximum amount of time. It's obvious, but you will also find that when you get the next set going, you will find that people tend to move faster, and you know exactly how the models work, and they behave, or they misbehave, right? And be able to take those decisions without having to investigate too much. So once you get going, it'll get faster, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, next is identify, watch, and learn, where we're talking about identifying the symptoms or the similarities, and then you're going to watch actions that have been taken. So now actions are like verbs in grammar, right? Verbs are actions are essentially their actions, obviously, but actions are the center of the system. So let me talk about actions now. uh, Give you some examples of actions so that you get relevance. A user, administrator creates a user, or administrator gives access to a particular user, or raises privileges for a user, right? This is in the user space. In the system space, system shuts down, system starts up, system fails on a particular process, a process makes a connection outside, or respawns another process. So these are all actions, right? So here you got to identify these actions, and you got to watch these actions go by. So you want to see sender, receiver, or action source and destination, and what the action was. These three things that you watch on, and basically learn from, right? So at this point, let's leave learning as learning. When we go forward with actual use cases, we'll figure out what learning actually is. And that of course we'll do in subsequent slides. Finally, is once you have learned, you will be able to, first you need to validate whether what you've learned is sacrosanct or not, because learning could mean learning the wrong things also, right? And based on what we have learned, it's important to learn the wrong things also. We'll come to that, but you need to also validate what you have learned and what kind of weights you want to attach to what you've learned. So what you've learned, if you learned the right things, then you want to make those right things heavier and from the wrong things that you learned. So once you validate it, you will essentially need to start identifying, uh, making decisions based on what you've learned, whether they're right or wrong, whether they're good or bad, whether right or wrong could be black and white. It could also be gray. So in models can also give you answers where the outcome is gray, where it can say, I am saying a true and false, but it's not saying a true and false. Guys, can you hear me? Have you lost me? Peter, can you hear me? Okay, okay. All right. So I think it's okay. I think we're okay. Okay, super. Thank you. So yes, it is either true and false, or it could be shades of gray as well. So both these possibilities are there, right? And finally we go to investigate and feed forward. So whatever the outcome is, when you detect an outlier, you essentially investigate that outlier. And once you investigate that outlier, depending upon how your model is, mostly it could be a feedback model or a feed forward model. We'll talk about all of these. Don't be stressed right now about what those things mean. But based on here, we're just basically defining the process. So once we investigate, we identify whether this was a false positive. If it was a false positive, usually what we do is we just reject that, right? And we just let that go. Here, you want to tell the system that, hey, look at this case. This is a false positive, right? And let the system also understand what were the parameters based on which you decided these were false positives, right? And if you've seen real attacks, you say, thank you. This was a fantastic find. This is a real attack. So that way, the rights get heavier and the wrongs get lighter, right? So automatically the model readjusts, and as time goes by, you will see your systems behaving like a human being, right? To say the least. Okay, next slide. So, what are the toolkits for the next generation threats? What do you need? Let's see. You need a next gen SIEM or a hunting platform. So what is a SIEM and a hunting platform? I'll give you and talk to you in brief. Largely today, SIEMs are driven on relational databases, or they're driven on file-based structures, right? Whereas a hunting needs to be substantially faster. Now, because they're driven on these data structures, the speed of the system, for everybody who's using a SIEM today will be able to comment on that. When you run a particular query, it takes a certain amount of time for the query to return back with data. Now, because of that lag, detection time gets stretched, right? But you will also find that when you are proactively looking for and you're threat hunting, you will find that when you're proactively looking for data, right? And there is a 15-minute lag or a 38-minute lag for a particular query. A particular hunter needs to fire about 18 to 20 queries to prove or disprove a hypothesis, right? And they might be sub-spawning different layers of queries underneath. But if the system is so stressed and is not able to provide a good enough response time for the queries, then the hunter starts to lose his track, right, to say the least. So you need what we're talking about in a hunting platform is extremely fast data store. And the next generation SIEM is where we are expecting your system to be able to run things like profilers, be able to learn and predict. I mean, they call it predict, but it's not really correct when you say predict. Predict means, yeah, predict in human intent. That's far away. But learn and be able to identify outliers. So that's what we call the next gen sim. Lots of There are lots of technologies out there who can do this. Uh, you need critical event sources, of course. Just having a system doesn't work. We've seen several customers that need to pour in more data so that this can go correct. Integrations and validations and response needs to be done. We need third-party validation sources that we spoke about, right? Things like file hash, domain URLs, emails, and registrars, right? All this is available in terms of intelligence. So you need to have access to collaborative data source providers. And finally, you need your playbook repository that you can build, modify, and train your security operations center with. So this is essentially a shared playground between your maybe threat hunting team and the security operations, right? So that's the connection that we got to make here. All right. So now this is the last section I'd like to talk about. Here we're talking about the attack surface. What are the different when we talk about attack surface? What are the different parts of our environment that gets attacked today, right? So that we can decide what is our scope in detecting attacks, right? So one thing that can get attacked is the user itself, right? Or what we call the insider attack. This is where the human being itself has gone corrupt, right? So let's say I am punching deals on my system, and I have connived with my group of friends, and we decided to game the system, and we essentially punch in deals where and we create a fraud scenario, right? So this is what we call the insider attack. Insider attack could be also disgruntled employees that we've learned for forever. It could also users that have gone rogue, right? So those kind of scenarios are all insider attacks. The second scenario is credentials, right? Or we call credential theft. So me as a user, if I go corrupt, I'm the insider. That's the insider attack. I am now going to punch deals on using my system, and the credential that I use to log into my systems get compromised. That is the second surface of attack. A lot of attacks happen at this level where stolen credentials are used to impersonate somebody and book a deal, right? Third is the endpoint that I'm using to book this deal, right? So if the endpoint gets corrupt or somebody is able to install some malware on the endpoint side, right, and is able to then walk through my endpoint and go book a deal on the system without me knowing, that's where this is the third surface of attack. The fourth surface of attack is the application itself, right? Where the application itself was corrupt or has been broken into, and then somebody side channels attacks directly onto the application. Now, what's happening here is that you can in side channel attacks. This is now if you look at it historically, the application is usually the data center, right? And that's where we are spending maximum amount of money until some time back, right? So we are securing applications, doing pen testing on our applications, making sure our applications are hardened. And since we are spending money, uh, it was getting more and more difficult to break into applications now, and or data center or server equipment, right? So then attackers started focusing on the endpoint, right? And then they started focusing on the credentials, and then they started focusing on the human being itself, right? So now you are seeing that interests of attackers and the point of compromise is coming closer to the human being than it is to the data center, right? So, uh, why is this conversation important? Because this is the strategy that we will use to write cases, right? This is how we will build cases based on this knowledge. Okay, now, so yeah, exactly what I said. Next session, uh, we are already running out of time. So in the next session, we are going to do a use case workshop on credential theft and the endpoints, right? So we are going to do two things together and leave the last session for applications as well as being able to deploy applications in a particular given environment, right? So I'm hoping that we are going to wrap this up in 3 sessions. We might have to do a fourth session as well, but we'll see when we get close. All right. Thank you so much. I am done with my side. I'll leave it open for questions that you might have, and
Yes,
I can
we
answer.
can do the Q&A, I think, huh? Natarajan has a question. Objective of the next gen SIEM is only to detect, add, leave to third party for paste proof. Then what about prevention and fixing of the threats?
Okay, so I think detection is a great question, by the way. Detection is always been the toughest, right? If we've been able to detect, we've been able to prevent. When the IDS came up, it solved a lot of problems. But it wasn't a major leap, right? Because once we could detect it, we could prevent it as well.
Shaminon,
So
you became,
today, in
you were
fact, yeah,
mute.
yeah,
You were mute for a few seconds. Just go back, just repeat from 5 seconds,
ouch.
10 seconds back.
Okay, okay. So I think we're talking about detection being the important, being the bigger brother in this game versus prevention, right? So you always figured when back in the day when the intrusion detection system came up, that was a huge leap on on in technology and cyber defense. But the prevention wasn't, right? Prevention is because we could detect, we just figured a way to prevent it as well. So even today, detection is still very important. Response is substantially easier that way. Response is important, but is easier because most of our systems are now connected. We can have feed forward or feedback going across systems, and we can also have response going through systems. So response and automation is already part of our environment, right? So we can write a rule to our firewall, block something on the proxy using API. So yeah, we're going to focus on detection on this one because I'm clearly assuming that if you can detect, you should be able to prevent as well.
Natarajan, I think that answers your question. If you have further questions, you can drop us an email or while the Q&A continues, just drop us another question. Ashish has a question of how we can design framework of effective threat hunting.
Wow, great question. Okay, so there are lots of frameworks of effective threat hunting, by the way, right? Already available, which are ready-made, which are open source. You can download and use some of those. One of the most worked upon or the most mature framework I would call, but it's still very theoretical. You still need to have the capability to take that theoretical model and be able to use it in the everyday life. Is something called the attack framework from Mitre, right? So Mitre organization that builds the CVE or the CVSS or the CAPEC library, they also have something. They also have a lot of work done on the attack framework. You should have a look at it definitely because, oh, by the way, at RSA this year, they just relaunched that entire thing, which is a huge update that came up. A lot of open source material is also available from CrowdStrike. A lot of open source material is also available from Red Canary. A lot of open source material is also available from, oh God, I forgot this name. It just came to me. Uh, Silence. Yeah, so a lot of open source material is available in most of these cases. If you use the NIF platform, Um, uh, every NIF user that logs in has access to threat hunting repositories, which are ready-made playbooks as well. So a lot of stuff is already available for free, which you can basically bring it together and use it for mend it to your goodwill.
Mhm. Great. I think we can take the next question. Ashlesha has a doubt about the third unknown threat and unknown to detect. What to
No,
do
Preeta, I
and
lost
what
you.
would be
I
the
lost you.
strategy?
I couldn't hear you. Hello, Preeta, I can't hear you.
Actually. So,
Hello.
yes, I think I'm audible now. Uh, I'll just repeat the last question again. Ashlesha wants to know, she has a doubt about the third adversary, unknown threat and unknown to
No, no,
detect.
no, no. Couldn't hear you. Couldn't hear you. Couldn't hear you. Sorry. Hello.
Now you can hear me
Yeah,
now?
now it's better. Yeah, perfect, perfect.
Okay, okay. Ashlesha has a question about the third adversary. She
Yeah.
says unknown threat and unknown to detect. What to do and what would be the strategy?
Wow. Great question. So, uh, here, if you go fishing, great question, Ashlesha, by the way. Yeah, this is something that we have to continue to think about. Most of us have started thinking about. Um, yeah, the most relevant analogy that comes to mind is when you go fishing, you can either use a hook to fish or a net to fish, right? So at this point, when we are still very rule driven, we are still using a hook, right, which could catch a particular type of fish in that space. But um, here we need to have profilers that can go wider and are able to cover a spread of actions rather than have more details or more sub actions that you're currently watching. So that is easier said than done. You need a lot of compute power to be able to do that. So one of the limiting factors is the amount of processing capability we have today, right? Technology is available, but I'm sure with time this technology um, will get further optimized, right? That it will need lesser compute, and we will also have access to more computing. So hopefully, when we move forward with that, this space will develop, and you will start to figure out stuff that you've never seen or never imagined, right? So that's where we are going. I hope that answers. Yeah, there is no straight answer to that. It's still work in progress.
Okay, I
And
think we
anybody
can.
who tells you
Uh-huh.
and anybody who tells you that they can do unknown, it's yeah, it's a little bit of pinch of salt is required on that one.
Okay, we'll go to the next question.
Yeah.
Hashokmi has a question. How do we detect and correlate a malware or virus infection in a system and identify the source from where it was downloaded, as in with traffic, internet, traffic logs?
Wow. Brilliant. So yeah, so this is a very tactical question. So what happens usually in when you have a virus is you start to investigate a traceback, and tracebacks can go anywhere, right? I mean, tracebacks can start with uh, where this where this file came from or the macro came from, where who all accessed this macro, how many emails were received by that person, was this a part of the email that came through. So there is a branch of investigation that needs to be done, and when you have a particular virus or a malware or um, uh, the crypto malwares that you have, right? One of the reasons the crypto malwares are very difficult because it basically takes down the system, and we lose uh, most of the times you lose action on or visibility to the trace, right? That's why very difficult to investigate those scenarios. But in most cases, that when you have certain life-threatening malwares that you see, there is you need to have those playbooks are the fattest playbooks. I can say that. So there are lots of tracebacks that need to happen, and one of those tracebacks will lead you to where it came from. This is a matter of practice. There is no easy answer to that. Yeah.
Clarity on that, then you can drop us an email. Okay, we'll go to the next question for now. Vivek Dharia, mobile application is attributable to traffic from credential stuffing attacks. That's a question. She wants to know if mobile applications have attribute to the traffic from credential stuffing attacks.
I'm not. I'm not sure if I got the question right. Uh, yeah. If you can catch me offline, maybe I can give you more clarity on this one. I hope I know the answer first. I mean, there's a chance I don't know the answer as well.
Okay. Okay, we'll take this offline, Vivek. Kalpesh Doshi, how much of correlation exists between threat hunting and deception techniques? Okay.
Wow. Nice question.
Good question.
Everybody likes this one. Okay, so threat hunting is sure you're looking for indicators, right? And when you see deception technologies give you nothing but indicators, right? Which is a very rich source of indicators, right, or UIs. So what you can do, so if you look at deception technologies, the false positive rate on deception technology is extremely low. So essentially, what you're saying is when somebody trips over a honeypot, that person is not supposed to be there, right? If if there is an IP address that we've created using a honeypot, that IP address does not exist in business. And if attacker or a person reaches out and tries to connect to that IP address, you know for sure that this is not a business use. If this is not a business use, then obviously it's certified that it is sort of a some kind of malware or attacker that's hitting us, right? So when you see attacks coming from being, yeah, I'm here. Hello.
Yes. I lost you for some
Yeah.
time. It's okay. We can
Sorry.
hear you.
Yeah. So when you see alerts coming from a deception system, you know for sure that this is not a normal user or this is not a natural cause, right? So that's when that becomes a fantastic starting point for essentially uh, investigating a particular attack. So uh, a deception system becomes a very rich source of providing starting points for investigation. Hope that was a decent answer for a great question. Hello, Peter? Sorry.
Yes, sorry, I got muted. Can you, Ashish Chauhan has a question. Can you please repeat again about the EOIs and IOCs?
Okay, great. So EOIs are events of interest. Events of interest are basically uh, scenarios or symptoms or actions which are suspicious at this point, right? Which are not clear that they are bad actors or malware, right? But after events of interest, when you investigate events of interest, it can either become a UI or it could be a false positive, right? So it could become IOC or a false positive. So IOC is essentially a hash or a malware or a file name which is known to be bad, right? Or a URL or a domain name or IP address which is known to be bad. So, for instance, when you see, let's say, crypto miners today, crypto miners have certain file names, have certain file hashes, right? And when you find a file name which looks like a crypto miner, you can validate that and you can validate the file hash. Then you are for certain that this is a crypto miner. Now, because of this collaborative intelligence which is available, you can shorten your detection cycle, right, substantially, right? So that's what you can do with IOCs. But EOIs are still very abroad and they're subject to investigation. So yeah, when we go forward, EOIs will become very relevant because you are going to be talking about a particular condition or a particular symptom which still needs to be investigated to say whether this is good or bad. Yeah.
Okay, great. We'll take Rakesh's question. Any way to convert a reaction approach into proactive approach? Any one example of real-time proactive SIM tool?
Reactive, proactive. I'm reading the question again. Sorry. Any way to convert a reactive approach to proactive approach? Any one example to of a real-time proactive SIM? Oh, so SIM tools are never proactive. SIM tools can be used in a proactive manner. So here we are talking about when you're going proactive, you are essentially using a human being that processes data which is already in the SIM, right, and is able to get answers and is able to look for attackers over there, right? So that is the proactiveness. When the system does it for you, it's reactive. But when you are working with the system to identify EOIs, that's what we call proactive.
Okay. I hope, Rakesh, that answers your question. We'll go to the next question.
Rakesh,
Uh,
otherwise the email address is on the screen. Shoot me an email. I should be able to talk to you on this one.
yeah. Either if you find Shomiron's email ID, just give him an
It's
email,
right here.
send him an
It's
email.
on the screen. It's on the screen. It's on the thank you
Yeah,
slide. Yeah.
right, on the thank you slide. And if you're still confused, you can always reach out to us. We'll connect you. That's also fine. Um, Kotamasu Kalyan, he wants you to repeat the sources you mentioned for threat repository.
For the threat hunting repositories, the playbook repositories.
This is going to be hard. Kotamasu, why don't you drop an
Yeah,
email and
yeah.
just get
I'll
this
just
clarified?
so I'll talk about the thread, the playbook repositories. One is the attack framework from Mitre. Red Canary has a lot of stuff on GitHub. Silence, Endgame, and which is the other one? Yeah, all these guys have GitHub repositories where they're sharing a lot of stuff. You could go sign up with NIF and then have access to NIF repositories as well. They're freely available as such.
Okay. Okay, Rakesh has, if we'll get in touch with you on the email.
Okay.
We have
Okay.
a question from Pawan. IOC indicator of compromise. It's not exactly a question. I think he wants to know the IOC
Yeah, IOC
indicators
is
of
an indicator
compromise.
of, yeah. Uh, I don't know what that one means, but if you see, yeah, I can talk about people providing IOC. There are lots of threat intelligence providers, all the big guys, McAfee, Symantec, Kaspersky, they provide intelligence. Then you have people like domain tools. You have, well, lots of providers are there for who give you Alien Vault, OTX Exchange will give you indicators of compromise for free as well.
Hmm.
They're pretty much well descriptive, very well described. Yeah.
Perfect. We have a question from Lopa
Okay.
Mudra. How SIM outcome can be used to detect the overall efficiency and effectiveness of security posture or portfolio of an organization, specific to cyber
Right.
protection?
Nice question. Okay, so SIM outcomes can be measured and classified first. You need to enrich your SIM outcomes a little bit so that they can be attributed to the kind of attacks or the surface of attack. You could take one of the two approaches. If you take kind of attack, then you will essentially align yourself with something like a CAPEC, which is also a mid-tray effort. If you take surface of attack, you could do it. We are going to take the surface of a attack kind of approach. So in this series, we are going to, because in the past we have taken, all of us have done a lot of kind of attack or style of attack or modus operandi kind of approaches that we have taken to threat hunting. This time we decided to take a different route and expose ourselves to um, the the surface of attack and remain that, because surface of attack, in my opinion, is the most implementable in our organization, because that's very easy to see for us, and we can sort of run circles around that kind of strategy.
Okay.
I
Um,
hope that makes sense.
let's go to the next one. In any case, guys, if you want to be more explicit on your answers or want to have a conversation, connect to us or Shomiron. If you connect to us, we will also connect you to Shomiron. So it's absolutely okay. Ranjit has a question here. Are SIM products available in the market, threat hunting ready? Any recommendations from product perspective, commercial or open source?
I didn't want to say this, but yeah, you can look at nif.it. Thank you, Ranjit, for asking this question. That gives me an opportunity to plug our product in. Yeah, so India's got a product, fantastic one. Lots of customers, most of the top banks use it, top telecoms use it. Yeah, it's DNIF, something that you can see. It's right
We've
here.
lost your
It's a
voice. We
big data
lost your voice for
analytics
two
and threat
seconds.
hunting.
Shaman,
Really,
we
right now
lost your
you lost
voice
my
for two
voice.
seconds. Yes, right now. Bad timing, I know.
Is this? You giving me another opportunity to repeat myself?
Yeah, don't
Okay,
worry.
so it's yeah, the logo that you see, DNIF, just Google that. It's an Indian product. It's top 50 customers, banks, the top banks, and telecoms use it as a big data analytics and threat hunting platform. You can also, apart from that, you can look at something called Splunk. You can look at something called Sumo Logic. These are the, and of course you can look at elk, right? But elk, you will need security engineering to be able to pull that off. But you can also use elk for doing threat hunting in this format.
Hmm. So basically, guys, Shominon is the founder of DNIF. So Ranjit, you can connect to Shominon for that. And he also mentioned a few competitors who are also good in this field. Okay, we'll go in for the next one. Um, are we sharing the presentation, Shominon? Some people
Yeah,
do
of course,
want
of course,
access. Okay,
of course,
guys, we'll be sending you the presentation
of course, we
and
can.
probably the recording. Okay, Lopa's question has been rewritten. We've answered that, right? SIEM outcome, we've done that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
This is done. Okay, Ashish Chauhan has a question. When it comes to in-memory attacks like fileless malware,
Fileless
how
malware.
can we
Yeah.
detect or what could be the approach?
Wow. Okay. Cutting edge question. So
Mhm.
fileless malware, although yeah, we depend a large amount on what's on the file system, but fileless malware can also give you execution trails. So if you're monitoring execution on a particular environment, because the file has to execute, right? It's in the memory, but it still has to execute. That piece of code has to execute. So if you're watching execution trail, then you will be able to identify that. And because when you're doing execution trail, you can also hash it, or you have access to function controls as well. So it's not that it's completely invisible. It's just that file systems, we're more used to identifying file names and file hashes. We need to, loosen our granularity a little bit and go into file functions or function level tracking rather than file name based tracking. So as soon when we go forward, there is already a lot of effort that's being made in collaborating on that front. You will start to see certain function level tracking that happens. You can use, I mean, Windows has got inbuilt, if you want to use something like a sysmon or regmon or memmon, right, or filemon. So sorry, memmon does not exist. Filemon, right? That set can do fileless, can give you logs for fileless. So there is a workshop that we do on how to use sysmon to detect those kind of that kind of malware.
Mhm. Okay. The good thing is, guys, we've actually crossed our time long time back, but I'm just keeping the questions coming. They're so interesting. We're enjoying this. Okay. Amit
Okay.
has a question. Should we not integrate SIEM with threat intelligence from third-party OEMs for dealing with unknown unknowns?
Oh, so the moment you have threat intelligence means that it is already known. It's not a 0 day, right? So then it does not qualify to be an unknown unknown, frankly,
Okay. So,
right? Since you
major
know
change,
about
Amit,
it,
in your
that's why
question.
it's documented. That's why it's documented, right?
Yes. Okay, let's take the next one. Guys, we're going to close in now, but I'll just take one last maybe. Okay, they also, audiences want to know if we'll be sharing the recording. I think recording ka we are not sure right now. We might have to compile or something and then do it. In some form we'll be sharing, but for now presentation you all will definitely be getting that. Right, Shamaran? I am
Yeah.
making
We'll
sense.
try and get
Okay.
the recording as well. Surely. I mean, we'll
Okay.
host it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
done. Okay, this is majorly. I think somebody wants to ask you a question. I'll unmute that person. Let's see.
Sure.
Nitin K. Nitin, you have a question. Your hand is raised. You are unmute. We can hear you right now. So if you have any questions, go ahead. You can talk. Nitin, do we have you? No, I don't think his hand was raised, but that might have been a mistake then.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else you want to speak directly? You have a question? Otherwise, we'll take it offline. So just raise your hand or ask questions. Question. Okay, Nitin's case was no question.
Okay.
Okay. Amit has further clarified his question, saying that to be precise, it was for dark web monitoring. I don't remember what Amit's question was.
Uh,
Unknown wala question. Unknown question.
no, no, no. Yeah, fir bhi. I mean, even if it
It's
is
yeah.
dark web, even if it is dark web, it's still it's
The
an
logic
identified
remains same.
threat.
Hmm.
The logic is the same. It's still not unknown. And unknown unknowns largely is, when you're going down that pyramid where known knowns are top of the pyramid, unknown unknowns are bottom of the pyramid, your action monitoring becomes vague, right? So suddenly, to give you an example, we were never watching CPU level attacks, right? Suddenly we are now watching CPU level attacks. So the attack surface has suddenly changed, right? So that's when we call it. So IOC is a very small subset, right? IOC is still at the known level condition. It's not even considered to be a known unknown. It's still a known condition. Right.
Right. Amit, I think you got the idea. Okay, guys, we'll take the remaining questions offline. So, anybody else has a hand raised? I think I can't see. Acha, Lopa Mudra has a hand raised. Okay. Uh, hold on. Maybe I think Lopa Mudra. We've muted you. Unmuted you. You can talk. I can see your hand raised if you have a question.
Yeah. Hi, Samiran. Am I audible?
Hi, Lopa. Hi. Yes, you are
Yeah.
audible. Thank you for
Samiran,
joining
thanks
the
for
webcast.
bringing the different prospect related to uses of SIEM. My question is
Yeah,
specifically, SIEM is predominantly used for the detection of external threat and internal threat when it is coming to the fraud kind of scenario, but
correct,
uh, while you are dealing with the threats, what is the percentage of use of uh, this platform to understand the efficiency of the people who are actually working within the SOC and their effectiveness? That is one of the part, because SOC or SIM, any this kind of technology, as you correctly mentioned, this is a reactive technology, can only be a proactive once it is blend with the human intelligence.
correct. Wow. Okay. That's a complex beat. Okay, so so I mean, if I understand this question correctly, are you looking for how do you measure effectiveness of a SOC, right? That the fact
Right.
that
For
you've
example,
invested
I
such
will
a lot
just
of
give you an
money.
example
Yeah,
which may help you to understand the question in a better
sure,
fashion.
sure,
So there could be
sure.
a virus infection within the organization, and while
Yeah,
analyzing that, we may found that this is actually the continuation happened through the what is called USB, and USB is
correct,
disabled within the organization still. That is happen. That case how SOC or
correct,
SIEM can be utilized to understand the efficiency. That means there is a lack within some implementation within the platform from the implementation and enforcement perspective, right? So
correct,
how those
correct,
things can be
correct.
bucketed using this technology, and what is your opinion how people are currently using it for those
Oh yeah, this
kind of
is
things?
a fabulous cross-check platform for cross-checking
Samiran, you are going mute.
implemented policies. I'll give you an example.
Shamanan, we
Samiran, you
lost
are
you
Am I
not
on
for the
mute?
last five
audible.
seconds. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now? Am I audible?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Lopa, thank you. Yeah, you'll be surprised. A lot of validation on existing policies is done at this level, at the SIM level at least, right? So, for instance, you have a firewall, and based on the firewall logs, you can essentially identify which ports are open and which IPs are open, right? But let's say let's say I start to see a new IP address communicating, right? And then I can figure out whether a particular rule was added to the firewall or not, right? And if that rule had change management approval or not. So this is a very typical rule that is used even today to validate and govern on top of existing processes. So what you're saying, yes, there is a good percentage of people who are using your SIM to also do governance and watch, being used like a watchdog. Now, how do you do that and how do you bucket them? You essentially tag your rules, right? So the outcomes can be tagged and enriched, and then you say policy violation, and under policy violation you have those alerts come through.
Okay. Samiran, would it be possible for you to share offline what are the major
Yeah,
scenario people are monitoring using uh, this SIM from this efficiency perspective?
I can. If you can just write to me, my email address is on screen. Just write
Sure.
to me. I should be able to share. Not a comprehensive list, but I can get together all that I can, and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Happy to.
Thank
Perfect.
you, Samiran. Thank you, Pritha.
Thank you, Lupa. Okay, I think we are done. We'll take the remaining questions offline. In this case, Shabiran, is there anything else you wanted to add,
Oh,
or you want to take a few more
we should
questions?
announce the next. Yeah, we should announce the next webinar sometime soon. We're still, working on the dates, but the next session we can announce on the email to all the participants. I think
Yes,
thank you so
yes.
much for participating on this one.
Yes, thank you guys for joining us. We'll be dropping you the email to join in the next part. There are total 3 parts right now planned. We'll be sending you the invites for that. Thank you so much. We'll be ending the webinar now. While you leave your webinar, uh, there's a small pop-up window that'll come. It's a small survey. It would be great if you could answer that. Okay? Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. So attendees, leaving the webinar is very easy. On your control panel, you'll see there are 3 buttons. One, there's a red small button right on top left corner of the control panel. If you click that, then your webinar will end. And you'll get a small survey pop up. Just answer that. That'll be great. And then that's it. Done for today. Thank you. The webinar is over, guys. We request you to leave the webinar. We're waiting for you to leave. So the experience is smooth. In case you have any queries, you're unable to leave the webinar, just raise your hand. We'll help you out.